News First, Newsline.
A very good evening to you and welcome to Newsline Zoom. And our guest this evening is a former senior advisor to the Ministry of Finance and, of course, Director General of the SEC, Mr. Malik Cader, who's also an attorney at law. Very good evening to you, Mr. Cader. Welcome to Newsline Zoom.
Good evening, Faraz, and it's nice to be on Newsline Zoom.
Now then, Mr. Cader, recently the government announced all sorts of tax measures. They widened the tax net, if you like, and so on. Is this really necessary for this government to try and raise so much more taxes?
For us, about taxation from the government point of view, at this moment of time, they need money. Okay, so they are basically one of the areas which they can get revenue coming into the kitty is by increasing taxes. That is the easy way out, right? Okay. The next one would be basically we are looking at tourism, we are looking at foreign remittances, we are looking at exports coming in. Those will come, but that will be a long drawn process for that to come. It's not going to come immediately. Yeah. But immediately what the government can do is to impose taxes on the public of this country. Fair enough, right? That is something that the government has to do and will do. But my question for us, my most important question to the government and the administrators of this country, do the public of this country have to pay for some mistake that has been done previously, willfully, right? And for someone who has put, not someone, many people who have put their hand into the kitty and robbed this country. For us, there are processes that can be put in place. I remember Honorable Mangala Samaravira, during his time as the Minister of Finance, said that this country has been robbed to the tune of 19 billion US dollars. He came out with some figures, justification to say that this 19 billion is something that has been robbed. For us, let's leave the 19 billion out. Some say that he has, let's say that the figure is exaggerated, but you and I and the public of this country know that we have been robbed. Forget about the 19. We will cut 75% of that. We will say 3 to 4 billion. If the 3 to 4 billion was there in the kitty at this moment of time, for us, you and I would not be talking on this subject today. People wouldn't pay, right, to buy bread 200 rupees, 60 rupees, which they paid in January. They're not going to pay 200 rupees. They're not going to pay 400 rupees of petrol, for which they paid 120 rupees in January, right? All this is happening not because of the fault of the people of this country. It is happening because they have been, all of us have been robbed. Now, my advice to the administrators of this country, the leaders of this country who are at the helm, right? Okay, you have no choice but to impose taxes on the short term. But in fairness to the people of this country, why have you not started an inquiry, an investigation, right, into these so-called robbery that has taken place? Or else people who have taken money out from the kitty, which should be rightly belonging to the public and the future of this country.
That is indeed a big concern, especially among corporates who can afford to pay these taxes, on who have always expressed a willingness. But more and more, when I speak to the various corporates in Sri Lanka, they all say more or less what you're saying, that what action has this government taken, real and sustainable action against those people who have robbed the people of this country completely silly. They've been robbing silly. and the
In
people.
other words, you're basically asking the poor man, the executive, the government servants to compensate for those who have robbed this country. My question is that fair?
I am sure, as Shah Rukh Khan's son would say, the peoples have come, and the peoples will disagree that it is fair. It is obviously unfair. But Mr. Cader, are you surprised that there is no initiative on the part of this government, led by the so-called champion of democracy, former vice chair of the International Democrats Union, the unelected but appointed president of Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe? Would you say that it is not surprising at all when you consider some other things? For example, the previous finance minister, Basil Rajapaksa, he announced in his budget speech that 8,500 million rupees being held by the central bank pending various investigations on perpetual treasuries will be sort of sequestered by the central bank. We've had no confirmation or otherwise about that. We have had no legal end to this problem, and neither do we have a legal solution to the Easter bombings or the people who came out of temple trees and attacked the peaceful protesters. So are you surprised?
For us, yes. I'm surprised that basically no action has been taken. But having said that, for us, I must tell you, for this moment of time, if there's anyone who could give any kind of comfort to the people of this country, or the economy, or the democracy, I think it is the current head we have who can do that. But having said that, for us, I mean, there are various people out there who are basically raising their hands that they can do this and that. But to take us perhaps out of this mess, this rut, we, I think, have a fairly capable person with experience. Having said that, for us, I must tell you, this is also like a little time bomb, okay? We don't know what is in store for the future. We have the next 3 months, right, which is important for the president, particularly because currently he is running this country, right, with the support of the 134. So I think when he has enough tools in his hand, hopefully by February, we will then see whether he will work for the 134 or whether he'll work for the 22 million population of this country. Now, until such time, for us, if you ask me whether I can say yes or no to your question, right, I must tell you, I can't. I will have to wait till February to see what action that is being taken. And it is then that we could make a judgment, right, on the modus operandi.
I put it to you that what Sri Lanka needs, and IMF is waiting, is an action plan. They need a plan to show the world, all the people who've lent us money, that we have a plan to repay that money, to service those loans, even after a haircut. And we seem to be having difficulty in getting that plan together, maybe because of China, that China is vacillating on trying to come to a resolution. Do you feel that, do you get the same feeling that China is not exactly playing ball?
Well, looking at the media, looking at some of the columns, editorials that are there, right, what can be said is that China may want a role to play in this whole thing. For instance, if China says yes to everything, right, they're simply giving up their role, right, or the upper hand they have on countries like Sri Lanka. So it is up to how we negotiate with China. But for us, having said that, I have this very funny gut feeling that 2023 is going to be a year of challenges, and we will certainly come out of the challenges, right? Provided we have a general election in this country, right, and have an independent government, strengthen the hands of those who need to be strengthened, right, and see that democracy is at its highest level. This country will certainly progress, because what happens for us, we are a very small economy. We are not a big economy, right? You see the World Cup, Qatar World Cup, they spend something like 225 billion US dollars, right, for that World Cup. What we need is just a 1% of that. I'm not trying to compare, asking Qatar that they should give us this money. No, right? It is just 1% of it. So it's a small economy. It is easy to repair, right? And then having the right people in the right places, I'm convinced that this would happen for the better of Mother Lanka.
But it sounds very rosy when you put it like that. But the fact remains that Sri Lanka's record in terms of international relationship is at an abysmally low level, even though we have the so-called champion of democracy, Ranil Wickremesinghe, as our president. But he's there backed by the 134. And I say that because there's growing concern amongst the international population about Sri Lanka's track record, or non-existent track record even, of sort of being accountable in terms of human rights. The use of the PTA, where innocent protesters are finding themselves being accused by the government of sort of breaching the peace, basically. And all the time, the government people have not been taken to task. Like you say, there's no accountability on the decisions that were previously made. And right now, there's no accountability process in terms of the people who came out of temple trees carrying sort of sticks and poles and whatever, and attacking the peaceful protesters of the Aragale movement. So in light of all this, which country on earth is going to encourage its citizens to make investments in Sri Lanka?
Yeah, for us, you're spot on. You have a point. But for us, what one needs to remember, you're asking me, okay, to go after us. Okay, now I am not alone in this whole scenario, right? There are my companions who are with me, right?
Yeah.
Who are basically accused of doing all this kind of stuff. Okay, so I have to first be independent. I have to first be independent for me to go after the so-called them, right? Currently, whether you like it or not, I'm with them. I mean, let's face it. Let's face it, right? That is the long and short of this story. So that's why I said we need to have that amount of independency on the hierarchy of this country, where he could take informed investment decisions, right, for the betterment of the greater society than a minority of the 134. Right, so the 22 million can demand and ask at a time of election whether such a thing can be given.
You know, I went on a little fact-finding mission around the south and the east and the north as well. And what I found is that although there is rampant poverty, the people there are coping because they have got their own paddy fields and they've got their own vegetable patches. And one of them said to me almost tongue in cheek that the biggest expense for him was buying the dal to make his paripu. And that was his biggest expense. But he also told me that around 40% of the population in the north get their monies, and from the Vanni, get their monthly sustenance from friends and relatives abroad. Approximately 40% of those people receive funds from abroad, from friends and relatives, especially relatives who've gone and made the Canadas or the United States or the Englands and New Zealands of this world their new home. So is that a sustainable proposition? Can our country rely on the goodwill of various people?
For us, I was recently associated with an event in the Nelumpokuna, which accommodated 1,200 young professionals, right? And this program was a program that promoted migration to Australia, skill migration. And this was not a program that was given free. This was a program which they charged money for entrance, and it was packed. It was sold out. I had the opportunity of talking to some young professionals, university graduates, in the age group of 25 to 35. Their only hope and their only wish is that if they get an opportunity to go out of this country, that was their only hope and wish. In fact, there was someone who was talking on that program, and he was saying in 2000 and early 2000, he left this country when he was drawing a salary of 23,000 rupees. He took his wife, right, and went out of the country. And today, he apparently is doing very well. What he was saying is, if he was in Sri Lanka, could he have afforded education for his 2 children in a private university? Could he have afforded a vehicle? Could he have afforded a car? So this 1,200 people which we saw, I think that is the future of this country. They simply want to move out. You're talking about buying dal for lunch. That is one scenario. But the younger generation of this country, they're looking at the future. They're looking at the future of this country. They simply want to leave the shores of Sri Lanka, which is certainly not a good thing.
Mr. Cader, don't you agree that Mr. Wickremesinghe is perhaps wasting the some hope that people have that he will be able to sort it out? Because after all, he had the nerve, I suppose, to offer himself up and say that, look, I'll come on and I'll take the leadership, which has its merits. But don't you think that people are rather, shall we say, fed up or disappointed? Because, after more than 130 days in office, Sri Lanka doesn't have a plan. It doesn't certainly have an action plan. The IMF monies were supposedly due in December. Now they can't do that. The economy has contracted, and the 62% who are daily waged people, their earning capacity has been impacted. So in between all this, don't you think that Mr. Wickremesinghe would be better advised if he was to give in to what appears to be the public sentiment, and that is to hold free and fair elections come March?
Paras, you're spot on. You're spot on. We have to have a free and fair election and feel the pulse of the people. I think the pulse of the people are very well known, although we cannot put it on a board and say that these are the numbers that are going to come, because people are fairly firm in what they want to do. You're right. Mr. Wickramasinghe was in the right place at the right time, right, when this happened. And I think he's fortunate. I must also consider himself lucky, right, to have got elected as the president of this country. And having said that, I must also say he might be one of the few or the only person I could think of at this moment of time who can come forward, right, and help Sri Lanka to grow. For us, you mentioned right now that there are issues that are cropping up. People are finding it difficult to eat and drink, right? But there is no overnight solution to all these problems, right? So here is a man who can, I think, give solutions to us together with the election, looking at the future, right? So I think if someone says, tighten your belts, yes, you might have to tighten your belts. But as I said at the beginning of this program, why have you and I to tighten the belts when some fellow has come and robbed all of us of our money?
And I think that really is the most potent question posed by anybody who's come on Newsline in recent months anyway. And that is exactly, why should the people pay for monies that have been robbed by appointed and elected officials? That's the bottom line, isn't it?
Yes, for us. And then if an impartial investigation is held, I'm sure you can rope in all these people right into the net. Our laws are fairly strong. Only thing is we need to have proper implementation. I saw on your program the police of Panadura, right, going into a house. That person was unable to explain his assets and wealth, right, goods, and the house was seized, right, and they were arrested because they couldn't. So our laws are fairly stringent. It is a matter of implementing, and who is going to give that direction for implementation.
Do you think, I know you're an attorney at law as well, but do you think that in the absence of a terrible balance sheet or a profit and loss account, that institutions like the Bribery Commission should be disbanded, because they're not fit, they're not acting for the purpose for which it was put in place in the first place?
Yes, you need to have a fair amount of discipline. I don't think they have to be disbanded. They have to be strengthened. We also have the Money Laundering Authority at the central bank, a unit, FIU. They have to be strengthened. Then they have to be put on the road. Right?
I think the FIU, you're absolutely right. The FIU have a very central role to play. And I say this to you because of this. If you examine, I mean, you and I and lots of guests on our program sort of continuously say that Sri Lanka is engulfed in a contracting economy. There's no money for this, there's no money for that. But you contrast that statement and that sort of point of view with the restaurants that are full, the hotels that have got the occupancy levels because of local business people staying there, and then people who stay in apartments and hotels long term and spend millions of rupees on bills. And yet I think there's a onus on the FIU to investigate such people and find out why it is that they are not paying any taxes, because they appear to be living here, taking the best that Sri Lanka can offer, and yet unashamedly they do not pay taxes. Unashamedly. These can't be patriots. They've got to be traitors.
Yes, Faraz, I think you're talking about the 5 to 10%, the very rich in this country, who are filling the restaurants and the hotels and the hotels down south. Yes. So,
But it doesn't matter that they're filling them up. If they're paying their taxes, then, God be praised.
so that's over to the FIU.
Absolutely. The FIU need to get their fingers out and get going. They seem to be stuck in a rut. And quite frankly, Governor Nandalal Veerasinghe, you need to look at that unit and see how their balance sheet is doing, whether they are fit for purpose.
Faraz, you're right. To do all this, we need to have that March election to test the waters, to have stability in this, political stability in this country, to give strength to people who should have strength, right? And take this to the next level.
Yeah. Malik Cader, thank you very much for your thoughts and your ideas. I hope that Sri Lanka will be able to move forward. And frankly, judging from the messages that we receive at Newsline, the time has never been better, according to what we receive, to have elections. Malik Cader, thank you very much for your time on Newsline Zoom.
Thanks for us. Thanks for having me on the program.
And that's the way it was. And take care and have a great evening, and God bless you all.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.